Welcome back to Eyes and Teeth, a man who inspired me, then mentored me, and to this day, 36 years on, just calls me for a chat, and sometimes it goes on for hours. Ventriloquist Jimmy Tamley is one of my closest and most loyal friends. 35 years of friendship and sharing anything to do with the art that has consumed our lives and fed our families. We talk about the early years of how we both started out, to tough times of venues closing down, and television giving up on the art we talk of, who inspired us the most. Where did we find our passion? Where do we work? What do our families really think of what we do? My brother threw a dummy down the stairs in anger once, but Jimmy's brother shot his with an air rifle. I assume he wasn't holding it at the time, otherwise he would have had a hole in his arm. Our conversation takes us worldwide when we talk about our favourite ventriloquists and the success of those such as Terry Fator and Jeff Dunham, and the upcoming talents of Max Fulham. Many things are a common thread with Jimmy and I, not just ventriloquism and the Beach Boys, but we share the same ventriloquist prop builder in Peter Pullen. Pete has created probably around 30 or more props and puppets for Jimmy and I over the years, and for Keith Harris, he even trebled that. So we have Peter Pullen to thank for all his hard work into building wonderful ideas from our brains. Thanks, Pete. As Jim and I had a lot to cover, we're building the excitement for my upcoming book, Ventriloquest. We do run over slightly, so this episode will be in 2 parts. So we better get to it. Welcome to Eyes and Teeth again, Jimmy Tamley.
Welcome back to part 3 of the big talent show, The Quickening. Coming up in this final portion of beefy TV goodness, we have our final 2 acts of the evening. The studio audience will vote to decide the winner, and of course, we have Robin Cook naked. So, let's start our 5th act this evening. He's a ventriloquist by the name of Steve Hewlett. As you know, a ventriloquist breathes life into a dummy and makes it seem real, in much the same way that Eddie Large did with Sid Little for so many years. To tell us a bit more about Steve's career up till now, we have Jimmy Tamley. Say hi to Jimmy. Thanks for coming on, Jimmy. And I saw the last series of this we had, the winner was a ventriloquist. Paul Zerdin with his puppet with his friend Sam. But you won a talent contest a few years ago, I believe, didn't you?
Yeah, New Faces grand final 1987.
Tell me about, we're just about to meet Steve, a young fella, also a ventriloquist. How did you get to meet him?
Well, after New Faces, there was lots of kids knocking on your door because they all find out where you live, and they're asking for autographs and stuff. And Steve came, you know, for an autograph, and then next day he came back with another autograph, and then it was questions and how do you do it, and where can I get a book on it, and teach me how to do it. And so he just sort of developed from there. He just kept knocking on my door.
How highly do you rate him now? Because you've seen X Lover, you're one of the top vent acts going, I know. How good do you think he is?
Well, I saw the early potential there, and when he was 12 years old, and I think he's got, you know, the talent to go all the way to the top. He's obviously 22 years old now, and I'm just glad he knocked on my door that day, and I've had a little part in his life. He's a great kid, and I'm sure he's going to do really, really well.
Jimmy, thanks for coming along. Jimmy, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Here he is. Please welcome the big talent of Steve Hewlett.
Whack it in the ears, and you've got it for years. Hey, that's going to be my logo. Welcome back to Eyes and Teeth with my part 2 of talking to Jimmy Tamley, talking ventriloquists. When chatting recently, I asked him if he would come back on and chat about my upcoming book, Ventriloquest. There's ventriloquists from the music hall to TikTok, YouTube, routines that are recycled, fresh ideas, the Got Talent franchise, the greatest dummy or technical ventriloquist. If you love your vents, then you will love these 2 vents, talking vents. We will vent our anger, vent our laughter. We've been doing this for 35 years together. Jimmy's been doing it a bit longer. It's a passion. It's our careers. And it's brought us together as really good mates. Welcome back to Eyes and Teeth, the world's greatest variety show, one of the greatest ventriloquists Britain has ever seen, Jimmy Tamley.
Yeah, and the crowd go wild. When I was a kid, I had little models of the Beatles, because I was mad on the Beatles in the 60s, like every kid. And it's for little John, George, Paul, and Ringo. And I just saw the movie Help, and had a little suitcase, a little kind of, and I compartmentalized it so they got a bedroom and bathroom, you know, kitchen and all that kind of stuff, and I'd make them come out, and there's like the movie Help where you see them walking into 4 terrace houses saying goodbye to each other. You know, you ever seen the movie Help?
Yeah,
yeah. Bye Ringo, bye Paul, bye John, bye George, bye Ringo, bye. and there's still ladies across the road going, "Oh, look, success just haven't spoilt them at all. They're still the same lads they always were." They all close the 4 front doors and they walk into this one big, huge palatial mansion inside. And it's totally all the mod cons, you know,
Yeah.
raising floors.
It was great. It's great humor, those films, weren't they? They were really good.
I recreated that with my little Beatles. I try and do that, and whenever they did a show and they sang in my, I'd always be a. I think all these noises like they try and make screaming girls. And I'm going to just turn the tables on you a little bit for this one, Steve, because we want to plug about and talk about Ventriloquest, your book, and various ventriloquists. And I think this would be a good podcast to listen to, two vents talking about other vents eventually. I think because you've interviewed so many people, I would like to see and ask you a few questions about your start in ventriloquism. What first piqued your interest in ventriloquism? You were about 12 or 11, were you? 1987, was it 87 or was it even before that?
It was. I've told this story thousands of times. It's always your name that crops up. So I didn't have any interest in ventriloquism, but
the New Faces Grand Final or the Heats or what?
We missed the Heats.
Last but not least, Jimmy Tamley. Come on, Jimmy, come take a bow. Jimmy Tamley. Woo! Jimmy Tamley. A star of the future? If you think so, then press your buttons. Now for Jimmy Tamley. Jimmy Tamley on the right. Right round. And up. And up. Oh, and the winner in the audience is...
So you were in the Basingstoke Gazette in November 1987, and my mum read the paper, or my dad, and they went, "Oh, there's a ventriloquist from Basingstoke on tonight." I didn't take in the word ventriloquist because I didn't know what that meant. I just heard celebrity New Faces Grand Final, and we would watch Variety as families all the time, but we'd never sat down as a family to watch because there was someone local on the telly. It's the only because the connection was that you were down the road that we watched it, not because we avidly, you know, watched TV shows together. We would watch like Catchphrase and the Grumbleweeds. All of those variety shows was something we'd all sit down to watch together. But because you were local, we really wanted to support you, and we did. And as soon as you came on, I was like, I had my mouth open, which is ironic after what you taught me. So, my mouth was wide open, and I was like, oh my God, I love what this guy does. And what he's just done made my family laugh collectively. And I was totally in awe of what you did. And the fact you live down the road, I was speaking to my mate Diddy at school the next day, and he said, "Well, I know where he lives. Do you want to come and knock on his door?" I think it was the day after, not completely the day after New Faces. It was 2 days later when I actually knew where you lived, opposite Diddy. Diddy Thomas, my good mate, and James, they told me where you lived. So it's their fault. And I just couldn't wait. I think I knocked probably before I went to school, and I should have waited till afterwards. So you're obviously exhausted from the last few days because you're an overnight celebrity, and it must have gone mad for you. But yeah, you was that spark. There was no interest. The first memory I have of a ventriloquist is Terry Hall, Lenny the Lion. When I was at school, I remember watching it on TV when I was 5 or 6 in black and white. I can picture it now, me sat there with my class friends watching the little black and white television of learning with Lenny. That's the first memory of a ventriloquist until I watched you do what you did.
Did you have the final on VHS recorded, or could you rewind it with the family, or was it just a one-off you saw? And then...
I didn't. I wasn't recording things then. The first thing I ever recorded was after New Faces, and it was Wednesday at 8. Ron Lucas, and then Strassman, and then Jay Johnson was on that show. So so I wasn't allowed to use the VCR. So I bought some blank video tapes, and I said, "Dad, can I start recording ventriloquists?" It was Wednesday at 8, those 3 ventriloquists. The 4th clip I recorded was Summertime Special with you and Gary Wilmot on that TV show. And so it spiraled from there, and I kept coming around your house. Once I brought the dummy round your house, and then Ray Allen's Got the Gear book. Once I told you that, yeah, I'm into this, and you realized that I was serious, that's when I kept coming back. And it wasn't till about a year later, after all the hot chocolates and the little lessons, that I started to do some gigs with you and roadieing.
Because the reason I ask is when I say in my act there's 67 million people in the UK, and there's about 8 professional ventriloquists. I mean, I'm saying that at the top of my head. I'm not including, this is not getting up ourselves as ventriloquists, but someone who can stand on stage for 45 minutes or an hour, just do ventriloquism and entertain an audience. So I know there's lots of magicians who dabble with their magic acts and children's shows, and people who can do a lot of stand-up comedy and a few minutes of ventriloquism. But for those people who just do ventriloquism only, that's just a handful of minuscule handful when you consider 67 million people. Why was the finger in the sky pointing at you and going, it's you? I remember my moment, my little eureka moment, and it was when I was a kid. It was like I was 14. I remember I was 14. Hey Jude was number 1. When I was 14, I was trying to decide what to have for Christmas, and it was like August. It was silly, wasn't it? It was August. It was still hot outside. What can I get for Christmas this year? Because it was a big deal. You didn't get many toys and prezzies in those days. Money wasn't in abundance with a working class Irish family with just a father who's a carpenter and 6 children to support and a wife. So wow. The Christmas present was your main big grab of the year. So I said, and I'd seen ventriloquists on television during the 60s, and I'm fascinated by it. My dad explaining it to me. And then just one August is, what can I get for Christmas this year? I've got the tracksuit, got the Man United boots and all this, the Georgie Best things and whatever minimal memorabilia there was around those days. Ventriloquist dummy. Oh, wow, what a great idea. Ventriloquist dummy. Where can you get one of those? And I said to my mum, I want a ventriloquist dummy for Christmas. She says, oh, you never find one of those. And typical of my parents, there's always a negative. So just the next day after school, I just jumped on a bus, went to Reading. The very first shop I went into was a little Jewish toy shop called Doll's Hospital. He repaired dolls and all sorts. A very clever guy, and lots of labyrinth of just hundreds and hundreds of toys. And I just went and said, what can I help you, young man? You want to get rid of me? Because a 14-year-old boy wandering around a big toy shop. And I said, I want a ventriloquist dummy. It pulls it down from the shelf. There you go. That's 30 shillings. Okay, I'll tell my mum. And then she came down a couple of days later and bought it. And wow. And because we're a Catholic family, they're going to church every week. I used to wait till my mum and dad went to mass on a Sunday, and they say, you coming, Jimmy? Oh, there's 6 of us, and you could choose. There's like a 9:30, 11 o'clock, 4:30 and 6 o'clock masses. That's just one church. And then there's other churches. So I go, no, I go later. So they go to mass, and then for an hour and a half, I just got in the attic, get him down and play with him for an hour or so and put him back. I did this every week until Christmas.
I did that when my mum and dad went out, but with my dad's porn magazines. And then I snuck it back in before they come home. So I was playing with him as well. Sorry, yeah. We'll move on. Ice and Teeth.
So it kept your interest up then, because I remember showing you a video sort of library of ventriloquists I had at the time, and you were very lucky at the time too, as I remember rightly, that 1987, 1988, Ron Lucas was making multiple appearances the next couple of years on British television with the Hippodrome Show and the Ron Lucas Show.
I'm Ron Lucas. I'm a ventriloquist. So what we're going to do for you right now is demonstrate what that is. Here we go. Watch the lips. They don't leave the face. Oh, give me a home where the buffaloes roam, where the deer and the antelope play, where selling is heard, scourging, where in the skies and not cloudy all day. Home, home on the range. Hey, all right, don't you walk on down, $25 dirty now, $30 dirty, will you get a dirty nigga, dirty, dirty, $30, who'll nigga, dirty now, dirty, Thank you.
So it wasn't just me you were seeing at my house and having little lessons and looking at, VHS tapes. You also had the influence of Ron.
Yeah, he came about just when you had your success on television, but he came at the same time. And then Keith Harris was still on the TV. Ray Allen was on. Roger, of course, he was on. But so it was still in the late 80s. It was still quite a popular art, wasn't it, on the television? It was a dying art, but you made it cool again back then, you know, like what Jeff Dunham has sort of done now in the UK. New Faces, sort of every 10 years it has a resurgence on TV talent shows. Because 10 years before you was Roger de Courcy in like 77, 76, I believe, on New Faces.
Somewhere around. All right. Pardon? All right. You in there, sir? Yeah. Right. Just have a little look, see where you are. Can't you read? Pardon? It distinctly says on the front here, other way up to open. I've been stood all night bleeding head for an hour. All right, come.
And then you were 10 years later.
The only thing me and Roger is, Roger beat Jim Davidson, and I beat Joe Pasquale, and the comedians we beat went on to be huge successes.
What is that?
that just shows you what the appeal of ventriloquism has, as opposed to a good comedian, which can be used in lots of scenarios. And
yeah. But then Roger would support Jim Davidson, and you would support Joe Pasquale. So you know, so in a way, we helped each other out over the years.
Yeah. So these were your heroes then, weren't they? The Ron Lucas and Ray Allen.
In order, it was Jimmy Tamley, Ron Lucas, and Keith Harris. Those were the three I would always watch, and they were the three that I had access to. You are right. I was so lucky around that time, because although there was books, I would always go to the library and get Valentine boxes. I Can See Your Lips Moving. I would get that over and over again. I had got Gear, so they were my Bibles at the time. And then I would finish school, and Jimmy would say, "Do you want to come tonight to the show?" So I'd run down the road and jump into your red Volvo, and we go to Weymouth 2 or 3 times a week. I absolutely loved it. I loved jumping in the car. My friends at school, I think I kind of went almost my separate ways. You know, I was, he'll be with Jimmy tonight. He won't be hanging out trying to drink cider outside the shops. He'll be with Jimmy, you know, playing with dolls. So I don't know what they thought of me at the time, but they loved what I did. You know, my first roadies, the first show I ever done at school was in assembly. I was 13 years old, and 4 of my best mates from school were my roadies. They helped me pull the curtains, play the music, and help me set up the stage. You know, I just tried to get them out of assembly by telling them that I needed more help than I did. But I got the picture on stage with me and my dummy and 4 of my friends around me. So that was in 1988. But yeah, I was inspired back then. But obviously you took me to shows, and you done the Basingstoke Carnival, and my mum and dad took me to that when I was at 13. It was, you were all over the place. It was so good to have that, but there was no internet. So I had to have help from somewhere. So if it wasn't the libraries, it was you, and you gave me that 10 years apprenticeship, which was incredible. There's no other way I could have learned what I learned. And the knowledge that I have was by watching you for 10 years.
And that's the thing, when it's such an obscure profession, when you're going down the ventriloquist route. I remember at school when I was 14, 15, just trying to find anything out about ventriloquism, and it was impossible. You're just running up against a brick wall. There's no books, there's no library, no internet. When they did appear on television, I didn't look at the TV times because we didn't get the TV times. So I never knew when an event was going to come on. My science teacher in school said he saw one once, or he knew one once, and I just kept asking the questions to the point where, you know, I was getting on his nerves because he had such minimal information, and he just kept repeating it. And then my dad said that there was a guy at work once that threw his voice and made it sound like it's come from somewhere else, but that just could have been my dad winding me up. But there was so little of it.
And your parents you said that they weren't that encouraging, but your father was actually, he didn't want you to do this at all, did he?
I recalled something last week when I was just telling my other half Rachel about it. Was every school had, you know, a bunch of bullies, a bunch of kids who sat at the back of the class and gobbed off to the teacher and that kind of thing. And there was 4 boys at the back of my class, 4 or 5 of them, and I just interfered with every lesson for every 4 years of my education at my secondary school. Every class for 4 years, there was just always the poor teachers often leave the school crying. the classroom crying. And
Oh, wow.
I remember when I was 15 with this new dummy, just before I left school, I went to school with this ventriloquist dummy that I got for Christmas a few months earlier. And suddenly I was cool with these guys going, wow, that's really good. Wow, look what Jim Tamley's got, you know, and I'd make the little thing talk. And I went home as proud as punch because for once I kind of got the bullies on my side.
Yeah.
And then my dad was already home. It was really weird. My dad was already home from work early and he was in a bad mood. He says, he's been looking at my school books and he says, where's that dummy of yours? And so it was in my kit bag, which is your rucksack and your kit bag. And he's got it out and smashed it up. Just smashed it up on the floor. Yeah. Not a very encouraging start, you know, to your ventriloquist career.
That's heartbreaking, really.
It was, but he actually offered me money not to perform when I was 16.
Did he?
I was doing a show for the church, and he'd offered me money not to perform in case I brought a bad name on the family, in case I died on my ass. I've died on my ass loads of times.
Oh, blimey. Yeah. These days, if people pay me not to perform, I would be a millionaire because to some of my shows.
Yeah, I did get, my mum did replace the doll with the identical doll from the Jewish doll's house store a few days later. And my brother shot it with his air rifle. But that was quite a while later. Yeah, I was up against it, you know, in those days. There was no VHS and no way to record. But I don't know how I persisted because I remember my teen years doing shows for old people and going around Reading. And my dad would say, you can't do the same script as you did last week because it could be the same people in. So I rewrote that. Yeah. I rewrote the whole script every time I performed and try not to repeat the jokes, not realizing that to perform and to craft a good show, you need to repeat the same jokes and hone them in.
At least a rule of three. Leave it in at least 3 times. Yeah.
No, once. So years that I sussed it out, and they go until someone says, "Why don't you do that bit that you did last time?" Oh, my dad said not to do it in case it's the same people. Same people in. We're 15 miles away from Woodley, you know. Or yeah. It's not going to be the same people. So
none of your family were in the business, and they didn't really have the knowledge of how the business worked, really. Or do you think he was still trying to discourage you by saying?
No, I realise when you look back now, it was just
he wanted the best for you, really.
Protect you and get a trade because you're wasting your time and all that kind of malarkey.
Yeah, but you did get a trade, really, didn't you?
I did get a trade for a little bit, yeah. But your family, on the other hand, were very encouraging, if I remember.
Yeah, but, they wanted me out of the house. Yes. Yeah. Well, can I go with Jimmy tonight, please? Yeah, go. But we won't have to feed him. We won't see him until bedtime. So it's no, seriously. When I started learning, they were. Because I was such a shy kid. You knew I was really shy when I met you, and I would hardly talk, and I was teacher's pet, kept in a cage at the back of the class, all that. But
what age you were when you first started roadieing? Because that 87 I won in November. 88 I was in Scarborough with Joe Longthorne for a few weeks, summer season, then Panto in Wolverhampton, and then Blackpool summer season. So I did holiday parks, but I don't remember what point. I remember you very young and very shy and very quiet.
I think I was probably about 14 when I first roadied with you, and it was all the havens around Weymouth, mostly around Weymouth, havens. And
I did Thorpe Park as well in the daytime.
Yeah, some clubs in Wales were still really bustling, you know, and you would take me to them, and I'd see the one-legged car park attendant, all the old classic venues, and you took me to, I think, Lakeside and the Stardust in Leicester. Some of those cabaret venues were still going, you know, and you knew everyone in the business, everyone. I remember once you did a gig and it was snowing, and I was roadieing for you, and it was snowing in the hills of North Devon, and Norman Collier was on with you, and you were worried about getting to the gig, and then I think we were panicking about getting back. But Norman Collier was lovely. His son was there that night. Do you remember that?
It was a miners' welfare association. They took ex-miners from, I don't know where Norman's from. Is it Nottingham or that kind of, some part of Yorkshire?
Possibly, I think near where Neville King was from, yeah.
Yeah, and they took these there's lots of people. There's this Calvert Trust. It was a big house in North Devon, and they took lots of communities and people with elderly or disabled.
I remember,
And this particular week it was the miners, because they used me quite a lot for various gigs for various associations that came down from the north or Wales or wherever, and they came to Calvert Trust, and we just put on a show in the evenings for them. I remember Norman Collier was in the audience. He was as one of their stewards, as one of their helping the miners.
Oh, right.
A lovely guy though. I did a couple of gigs with him, I think before that, up north for another agent. But yeah, one of those legendary comedians, who's graced our stages, and you think, oh, it's just nice to say you work with him, But and then to see him doing his charitable work and bringing all these ex-miners down to Devon and helping them out, And
That was so nice. Yeah, I remember sticking the chicken mask on his head in the dressing room and going out there. He was brilliant. That's the first time I saw him. I'd be roading for you. You'd be with Jimmy Jones and Jeff Rowe, and I'd just be backstage, just in awe of watching you and helping you carry your trunks on, carrying on Knuckles. And Knuckles is my all-time favorite of yours. But I've grown to love Lightning Les and your other characters. I love watching you do the mask. I learned so much by watching you, and because we still talk now. I'm 48 now. I was 12 when I met you. You were 32. I'm 48, and and you're still 20 years older than me. So it's been a long time friendship, longest friendship I've ever had. But we've laughed together so much. And not just the roadieing and stuff. We'd go to Beach Boys concert. The first time you took me, actually, you played a Beach Boys CD, and I got hooked then also on the Beach Boys. And I'm a massive, avid fan of the Beach Boys. We've seen Brian Wilson together. We saw the Beach Boys at Wembley. And it's just an incredible, thing. We're so similar, aren't we?
You left a CD behind when you stayed the other day.
It's got Carl Wilson's greatest song on it.
I want to listen to that with Billy when he's in my car with me.
Yeah. Oh, it's a beautiful album.
Yeah, but both albums, the Holland and I love Carl and the Passions. No, but what was your when you're starting along what did you find most difficult when you were starting out? What the hurdles when you've left the comfort of being with Jimmy Tamley to use as a sounding board, and you're out there on your own performing, and then you suddenly realize, this is not going to be the easiest route that Jimmy makes it look easy. Or what were the hurdles you came up against to start with?
Yeah, I was so much in awe of the ventriloquist world, and I would connect with all the convention magazines and things, Mayor Studios and the Vent Talk, all those sort of magazines. I just try and get as much information as possible. I read all the books. I got the Radio Times and would search for the word ventriloquist to see if there was a variety show on or someone on Desert Corner. I was infatuated with the word ventriloquist, and every time you would call, I'd be so excited about coming to a gig, or you just phone up for a chat and see how I'm doing. But when I first started to go out there and do shows, done charity shows, and I need to thank you as well, because you was the one that made me go to college, because none of my brothers or sisters went to college. You made me stay at sixth form, and I did another year because of you. I just wanted to be a ventriloquist. I thought, what can I do to better myself? And you said, go to drama, do the drama course and try and better your results, because you were crap at school the first time round. Just try and get better results. That didn't help, but the drama made me a little bit better in myself. I've always been shy, like I said, but I started to come out my shell a little bit more. But it wasn't until my early 20s that I started to, until I met Nina, really. And I was like 23, 24 when I met Nina. I was still quite shy up until that point, quite a quiet person. But overcoming that fear, really, of talking on stage myself, I would always really use the characters, not to the extent it would be like Arthur Worsley and Charlie Brown, but I would say a few words, but I've looked back at videos and I've been quite shy. I would repeat words just to cover my, it wasn't scripted. It was scripted mainly around the characters talking and doing jokes and routines. But yeah, I trying to overcome that shyness was the hardest thing for me. And then the material, obviously you get onto the material, it's another story, isn't it?
The shyness is something I'm not sure when you look at ventriloquist performance. I honestly think when you look at the way we behave with a dummy, there's not a lot of deviation over decades and decades of watching ventriloquists, and you can see them on YouTube. The ventriloquist is obviously always the straight man. The ventriloquist is feeding the joke, the straight man in a comedy double act. You know, what are you doing that for? How many times have I got to tell you not to do that? You're next to an idiot, and if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't talk. You know, and all these kind of lines we feed the dummies, and they come back to you with something smart and something funny. But the way we behave, I often think that I could probably do if I, you know, Jeff Dunham's act. I could do Paul Zerden's act. I could do Ray Arn's act. I could do, because we all kind of behave the same. It's only a matter of learning scripts. And then I couldn't do all the voices that all of them do, but I've got my own versions of the voices.
Sure.
But
some ventriloquists I know do other ventriloquist acts.
No, but I think that the way the ventriloquist behaves, it's of a type that can't be deviated much from, because when you start becoming, if you imagine someone more extrovert, if you imagine like Alan Carr or Tom Allen, and if the ventriloquist behave like that, how does the dummy respond? You know, if you're as hilarious as Tom Allen and Alan Carr and Jimmy Carr, then how does the ventriloquist dummy behave? It wouldn't be able to shine a light to the overpowering personality of the comedian / ventriloquist standing next to him. So we have to work within the constraints of having
double act
to feed the lines and make it funny, but also we're the ones dealing in the paradoxical way. We're the ones dishing out the punchline anyway. But
oh, contributional.
But the shyness is something that's probably there in a lot of ventriloquists, I would imagine, because you're not. I feel really funny. I don't feel funny. Well, listen to the interview we did 3 years ago. I listened to it this morning just to see what we were talking about, and it's not the most hilarious conversation. But if you're a new ventriloquist starting out, you listen to you and me bantering, and you probably learn quite a lot about, you know, dying on your ass and all the stuff we talked about.
It's the technical things about working the dummies and hecklers and things, and it's a really nice lesson. And I want these to be a lesson, not just the conversation of the past, but I want people to learn from them. So, you know, if a ventriloquist is learning like me, I would love to sit down and listen to me and you talk about how it works. And we're trying to help people paying it forward, you know, like you did with me. And, you know, say a ventriloquist, you just watching Ray Allen or something, and that may have helped you in those early days, you know, or Dennis Spicer, or about paying it forward, isn't it?
As I said, we kind of behave the same. So we're kind of a type of performance. And when I listened to an interview of a bonus on, it was on Happy Time Murders, and it was a puppet movie that came out.
That was great.
Half puppet, half humans. And it was Brian Henson, Jim Henson's son, who produced it. And then in the extras, there's chats with the cast and that. And Brian Henson does an interview, and he said something quite poignant. I was listening to him, and he was saying that when an actor or a comedian portrays a character, that they behave that way of the character, they talk that way, they you know, incorporate the character. When it's a puppeteer, and he works with puppeteers, and they're holding a puppet, they're not thinking in themselves, they're thinking outside of themselves. Because when the character come alive, you've not got to think within like a comedian or an actor, you've got to think outside yourself. So it's when we pick up a puppet, I can't walk up to a girl or a lady and say, "Hello, darling, how's it going? Oh, you fancy a bit of this body, eh?"
Because you've got a girlfriend.
With my little grandpa,
Oh, I know what you're thinking. You're trying to imagine me naked now, aren't you?
And it gets well, you know. So you're thinking outside yourself. You're not thinking within like a comedian or an actor. And I thought Brian Henson, you know, that little moment there, I thought that's what we do. I'm not funny, but put that puppet on my hand. I walk into the room with the same crowd of people. Suddenly, I can take the piss. You know.
And you get away with it. You did, and you have. Yes, that's fine. It's almost the same as Avenue Q, in that when the characters are out there, but there's only half a character, and you've got the puppeteers on show, but they have to show the reactions, or what's the word, the facial expressions of the puppet by what they're saying. If they're sad, then the puppeteer shows sadness on their face, but they're doing the voices as well. I was speaking to Rose Dalton, Dennis Spicer's sister, like 10 years ago, and she said about transference. And transference is when a ventriloquist is talking, the character would do all the expressions, really, but the ventriloquist doesn't show that. It does the opposite to what the puppeteer in Avenue Q or Spit and Image does. Now, you're about to speak about Spit and Image. You're about to speak about Spit and Image, the musical. It's not easy to say, but wasn't that incredible? Even though you can see, the puppeteer work in the Spit and Image puppets, it works, and it's one of the most amazing visual comedy puppet shows I've ever seen. It was not only hilarious, but I loved it. What did you think of Spit and Image? Because they use the transference thing.
Yes, it's as you say with Avenue Q, and with Spitting Image, I really noticed it. The puppeteers live the puppet. When the puppet's getting a smack in the face, like there's a Tyson Fury, so there's going to be a few fists and a few
Brilliant,
and they feel it. There's a few. It's quite a physical show, and you can see that although they're miming to a track, that the puppets lip syncing to the track, that the voices that the impressionists have left behind, they're actually, their facial expressions are living what the puppet is saying. But we can't do that because we have to do the opposite. The puppet's angry or sad or excited, and we go, yeah, what are you going to be excited about?
Oh yeah, look at them. Oh yeah, I'm so excited about.
Yeah, calm down, will you? You're saying one thing and behaving another thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's right. And talking of which, ventriloquist, shall we move on to your book? I want to talk about other ventriloquists.
To be continued.
Now, you've talked to a lot of ventriloquists, you've communicated to a lot of ventriloquists, and you've had conversations and audio and email and with a lot of people with ventriloquists and people associated with the top ventriloquist. Ventriloquest. Now, when did this start for you? You the quest to write a book about the top ventriloquist. What was the initial idea for Ventriloquest?
I think in the early days was when me and you got together and we'd sit down and watch the videotapes with the hot chocolate, and you kind of instilled that passion into me. It wasn't just like, oh, I want to do that job and earn loads of money. It's never been about the money for me, ever. Although I've known I've needed the money to get through. And this is why I do these big projects where you go, Steve, learn your lessons. Stop doing that. Don't put on these tours and stuff. And I do take your advice. But for me, at the end of the day, it's not about, it doesn't need to be about the money, because I've got kids to feed and a wife to keep happy. But it was all those early days of watching those, those videotapes of ventriloquists. And then I started to write to ventriloquists, like Peter Bruff I wrote to Ray Allen and John Bouchier. I found out where they were working in the back of the stage newspaper. And I had Peter Bruff's address. I wrote to Neville King.
A lot of conjurers on this show, and I'm fed up of seeing them. Now, what do you know about show business? Everything. So you come here interfering with my act, and you think you know everything about show business. I've done the lot. You've done the lot. Everything. I see. And what did you do in show business? I work for a ventriloquist. Very, very clever, I see. You work for a ventriloquist. You were one of those little dollies that they sort of got to appear. Yes, I remember. And then you sang a little song, and then I remember, then the ventriloquist sort of eased you up there on top of a big case, put you in the case. Not me. Oh, yes, I saw the act. You see, what happened? No, take your hands off. No, you see, what actually happened, you see, take your hands off. You've seen the act. I'm not going in and put it back. Don't see the act. I know what happened. I'm not going in now.
I wrote to Terry Hall, Lenny the Lion, in a theatre in Brighton. But when they wrote back, some of them would give me their address. Some of them weren't stupid and they didn't give me their address. Yeah, you couldn't have got away. You must have told them. So you took me to see Neville King, I think twice on the Isle of Wight. And so I watched Neville King. I watched him once on my own and watched him with you. And We met him backstage. There's a great picture of me, you, and Neville on the Isle of Wight. It was those early times of watching ventriloquists before me, like Arthur Worsley and Sandy Powell, you know, that crazy codvent act that he would do.
Here's a little ventriloquial scene entitled There's Something About a Soldier. Now tell me, my little man, how are you this evening? It's just at first, that'll be all right. So you're very well, are you? And tell me, have you any brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I saw your mouth move there.
You mind your own business, will you please?
Well, I did. I was going to
I told you. Peculiar, I told you. No relation, only by marriage, that's all. No religion. But ladies and gentlemen, I must tell you, we've been married over 20 years and never a thought of divorce. Murder, yes.
That made me go, oh my God, I love all these other ventriloquists. There was ventriloquists 50 years ago. And, you know, in the 80s, you talk about the 30s, the music hall, in the 50s and the 60s, Arthur Worsley, Dennis Spicer, Terry Hall. The Beatles' first ever TV show was on Terry Hall's Lenny Plays Pops. And David Bowie's father produced Terry Hall's TV show, which was all about music. And the Beatles were actually coming into the studio, and they went to the dressing room, and they had the same size dressing room as Terry Hall and Lenny the Lion. And there was a partition down it. And this is Denise Hall, Terry's widow, told me about this story, and it's in the book. But I'll tell you it now. So John Lennon knocks on the door. He goes, "Hello, Terry. Do you mind if I come in?" And so he sits down with Terry. He said, "The boys are next door. We haven't got much room. Would you mind if we open the partition so we can share the dressing room space?" And Terry went, "Of course." So he opened the partition. Terry Hall, Lenny the Lion was there, and the Beatles. They shared a dressing room, so they had a bit more space. And then they went on and done their first ever TV show. But I think when he first was told about the Beatles coming on, Terry said, "Oh, don't you know who they are?" He said, "No, you don't." He said, "But by the time they go out on your show, they're going to be mega because they've just hit a #1." And so we got him on Lenny Plays Pops, and David Bowie was in the fan club of Lenny the Lion because he would hang around the studios, David Bowie would, and he would watch Terry Hall, Lenny the Lion do his thing because his dad was producing the TV show.
Well, hello, boys and girls. Hello, boys and girls. I'm going to start off this afternoon by singing for you a little song that I have just written myself. No, you mean written. A song isn't rotten. This one is. Is it? Yeah, listen. There was a young farm girl called Mabel. At milking a cow was unable. So to get the thing right, she practiced eating night with sausages under the table. Yeah, you're right. It is a rotten song. And what's more, he's got a rotten voice, hasn't he?
So just that little nugget of a story is something that fascinated me when I started to read and talk to, you know, sort of siblings and wives of the ventriloquists that are no longer here. I sat down. The first interview I ever did for the book, what made me think, wow, I don't know why I was doing an interview at the time. I wanted to make a TV documentary, but I wanted to archive something. So I went to Michael Worsley's house in Blackpool, which is where Arthur Worsley lived. And Audrey was still with us. She was in her early 90s. And I sat down with her. Michael made a lovely pie, and Nina come with me. Audrey was a dancer, and Arthur Worsley met Audrey, and they had this wonderful marriage together in Blackpool. They had Michael Worsley and his little brother, Charlie Brown. So when I turned up to the house, I went into the living room to sit down, and me and Nina sat down, and Charlie Brown was sat in front of the TV. They'd set this up for me for a bit of fun. But Audrey was talking to Nina as a dancer, and I was talking to Michael the whole time. We had a lovely dinner, and they gave me photographs and said, if you're going to write a book, you can put these in the books. I've got loads of private photos of Arthur Worsley and some beautiful 10x8s, you know.
Son, look at me. Do you like a christening, eh? I love a christening. Son, do you remember, look at me, look at Charlie, do you remember when you were christened, eh? Of course, we all know this lad as Arthur Worsley, but his real name is Arthur Lastit Worsley. That's his real name. The vicar called his knee on the font. And he was on a doorstep in a little basket. He was on a doorstep as a child for 2 days, and nobody took him, did they, son? Nobody took him. So his father and mother opened the front door and took him in again. Just look at him, eh? High-speed gas. White strength. Last week at this time we had Charlie Drake, the worker. This week, the shirker. And you know what? People write into me and they say, why doesn't he say something? They say, why doesn't he say something? Never says anything, does he? Never says. He's in another world, And if he did open his mouth, you wouldn't understand him. He wouldn't. You wouldn't tell talk from mutter.
And I sat down with Rose Dalton, Dennis Spicer's sister, as you have done, and talked about Dennis. I spoke to Dennis's mum when she was in her 90s. So all of those stories, and writing to Terry Hall when I was a kid, all those letters, the photographs they sent me, I thought, I'm going to start collating all these, putting it all together into a book. When I met up with David Strassman worked in Eastbourne. I met with him, and then I loved what he did. And I said, David, can I interview you, like, over email? Can I email you? He said, yeah, go ahead. He was the first email I ever emailed a ventriloquist an interview. So I got Strassman on board, and then I got in contact with more ventriloquists, Jay Johnson, and they said yes. And I've got yourself in the book. We'd lost Keith Harris by this time, and he was going to write the foreword for the book, but he was really not well. He just didn't get time to do it. And but I was going to interview him as well, and again, he wasn't too well, so I couldn't get Keith. But I spoke to Sarah about Keith, and I've researched Keith so much. There's a massive biography and tribute to Keith in the book. I interviewed Ron Lucas. I got Nina Conti, Paul Zerdin, Chris Bylett, all the events that you could imagine over here. I talk about Paul Event, Ken Wood, he's in the book. I've contacted and interviewed Jeff Dunham, Terry Fator, Darcy Lynn, who won America's Got Talent, the 3 winners of the America's Got Talent winners, and Celia Munez, who won Spain's Got Talent. Then I started to branch out into Spain, Germany, Italy, Africa, and India, Australia, and I've interviewed ventriloquists all over the world, and that's called The World's Ventriloquist, that chapter. And I wanted to get their perspective on how did they get into it, and what is their success like, or how did they get to the point where they are. And again, like me and you talking today, I want that to be passed on to a younger generation. Like, how did Nina Conti get to where she was, or what made that decision for her to do the mask routine, or Paul Zerdin, what was it like winning America's Got Talent? Darcy Lynn, what was your inspiration? So everything, it all boils down to really to a few people. Over here, it was, for me, it was yourself. Keith Harris inspired people, but Arthur Worsley inspired Keith Harris. Dennis Spicer inspired. Terry Hall was inspired by. A lot of events were inspired, by one, like Arthur Prince back in the musical days. In America, you talk about Paul Winchell, Edgar Bergen, and Jimmy Nelson. And they would be the 3 key ventriloquists over there, where thousands of ventriloquists would go, yeah, that was, Jim Barber would say it was Paul Winchell or Jimmy Nelson. And so we're all inspired, but I wanted to find out how all the greatest ventriloquists in the world were inspired in the beginning, And so I contacted them, and a lot of them said yes. And I do think that it was quite difficult getting hold of Jeff, because Jeff is always on a world tour. He's always creating a Netflix special. And I thought, okay, so I did interview him in Bournemouth, and he came back with the interview, and he finished it all. And it was amazing, because I could not do a book without mentioning Jeff Dunham, because he is the world's most successful ventriloquist of all time. And there's no doubt in that. There's no one can surpass what he did, because you can't work the O2 as a ventriloquist. And I never thought anyone would as a vent. Maybe there's still a way that we could do it. Maybe we could do a massive ventriloquist convention at the O2 where we could all do it one day. But I don't know if anybody could get the YouTube hits, the DVD specials and the Netflix specials that Jeff has done. He's up there with Seinfeld and, you know, Eddie Murphy, all of these top comedians that have broken box office records. So to have Jeff Dunham actually finalize that final interview was a great scoop, because you can't do a book without mentioning him. I didn't want to mention him and get it wrong as well. I wanted him to go for everything I was asking him. And the same with Ron Lucas, who was, you know, I got a great tribute to Keith, but I needed you and I needed Ron Lucas in the book. And so it was really important to get our connection. All the books that we've read that you pass on to me, that they've inspired me, you know, to not just to write my book, but I wanted to write a different book. I didn't want to teach people how to do it. I wanted, and not just do a history of I can see your lips moving. I wanted to, and I have got Valentine Vox. I've got a very short interview with Valentine in the book, which means a lot, because his book was our Bible, you know. Shari Lewis wasn't here. I love Shari Lewis, and I contacted her daughter and done a interview about her mother. So all of these ventriloquists, Neville King, John Boucher, Ray Allen, all of those kind of made me who I was. That they got back to me. I'm so passionate that I wanted to connect with. We're kind of a connection, aren't we, from the music hall to the present day to Netflix and TikTok. We're kind of in the middle, aren't we? We've both done talent shows, but we love that. We're very passionate. I know me and you are probably two of the most passionate ventriloquists in the country, that we respect the ventriloquists before us. And I don't want the industry to forget the great ventriloquists that we've had. So I'm reminding them of all the greats, and I'm reminding them that they were there, and there are still great ventriloquists out there. There's not many in this country, but around the world, collectively, Ventriloquest is my quest to let people know that it's not a dying art. It's a fantastic art, and it's a funny, brilliant visual comedy, unique piece of entertainment that can go on forever. But I am worried that in the next 10 to 15 years, that if the venues aren't going to be there anymore, because I'm finding it hard to, you know, find theaters without the television. Television's changed over the years, as we know. Since the 90s, it got more difficult. I'm worried in the next 10 to 15 years that ventriloquism will die out in this country, because there's no support for it. Now, when I do a theatre tour, the TV companies, they're not interested in trying to help another ventriloquist. They may stick to one or two that they've always helped over the years. Whereas it used to be, was it Keith Harris, Ray Allen, Roger Corsi in the 80s were always on the telly, maybe in the 90s. But in the early 2000s, it died out. You get the Paul Zerdin, Nina Conti, but it's like they don't want to go beyond that. You know, so if they don't do that, if they don't include like Max Fulham and yourself and maybe me, I've got some great ideas, but they're not interested in, they're letting it die out basically. But if I don't put my book out there, or you don't do this new YouTube idea, I don't know if you wanted to mention that, but you've got a brilliant idea that you want to do. If you don't do what you want to do, and I don't do what I'm doing with the podcasting and talking about the ventriloquists, it will die out. If we don't put this out there on the internet or put it in a book form, then it will die out, because the books are going to be from 20, 30 years ago, and they'll just look at it as a history piece. I'm talking about my book being a piece of the future of ventriloquism. And that is my quest. I want to remind people of the greats, but I want to remind them that it's still there and it can still be a fun thing. But what is your view, Jimmy Tamley, on the future of ventriloquism? Do you think it could die because everything's been done, or is there something we can do?
That was a long sentence.
There's a question in there somewhere. I'll let you find it.
Okay, but rewind 15 minutes.
Well, that is a passion, though, isn't it? It's a passion. I get passionate.
It comes across. Yeah. It comes across, Steve. It comes across, which is beautiful to see. And we all need that, you know, because sometimes there are days you think, oh, I just want to talk to someone about what I do, and I've got some ideas. And you know, the book sounds to me like it's kind of bringing everything together from our pasts and the present, and bringing it all up to date. So someone coming into ventriloquism now could look at the book when it comes out in the next year or so and go, wow, this is the history, this is everything, this is what I can learn from this. Because you can't bring ventriloquism forward until you look at the past. You've got to, you've got to connect the dots, as they say. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. That's the Steve Jobs quote. But what you've got to look back at the Valentine's Vox book and see the history and the other books and go through the radio ventriloquists of the 40s and 50s and the early variety of ventriloquists in the 60s and 70s and see how inventive they were. And when you look back at the history, especially when you look at Valentine's book and you see some of the contraptions and some of the props they used in those days without the media that we've got, they were just the most cumbersome looking things. Like, how did you transport that show with a barbershop scene where he's got the ventriloquist is the barber and he's got lots of characters all waiting to be served and have their hair cut, as a courtroom scene where the ventriloquist is the judge and the defendant and the lawyers are the dummies, and all this just wonderful scenarios where they're building a whole kind of play, as it was back in those days, 100 years ago, around the whole evening's entertainment.
Yes, I know a man who joined the Navy as a ship's boy, the same as yourself. Today, he is an admiral. He's an admiral? Admiral, yes. Long young made a bloomer, I only said a captain. When did he join, sir? 45 years ago. When, sir? 45 years. Something must have detained him, you know. How long have you been here, sir? Oh, about 17. You're not an admiral yet? No, not yet. Not even a captain, not even a captain. Is it very hard, sir, to be an officer? No. All you've got to do is to pass the examination. Are the examinations hard, sir? Some are hard, some are easy. We've got some easy ones, all right? You think I could pass any of those, sir? No. I don't think you could pass the easiest one.
We do now, in the cruise ships and the holiday parks and the functions and all that kind of, we still do like probably a longer spot than they would do. They're going to do 45 minutes to an hour, which is what they have. The difficulty at the moment, which I'm finding, is the venues are not finding the up-and-coming comedy acts. They're finding it difficult to find up-and-coming comedians, up-and-coming ventriloquists, people who can work a mainstream audience. I'm not talking about the comedy clubs where you can F and Jeff and swear and say what you like, and there's a place for that comedy, and I do love that comedy. I love listening to those comedians from the comedy clubs, but they don't transfer over to mainstream, which is where we can step into a stage where there's a family in front of you. There's kids, there's the grandmother, like you the other night. There's a 91-year-old and there's some 8-10-year-olds sitting in the crowd. And in between, there's every other age group. And I saw you in that theatre. But when you come on stage now in the holiday parks and the cruise ships, you've got to be that entertainer who can make them laugh. You can make everyone laugh. So, but the grounding is not there like it used to be. The roots are kind of slowly rotting away. The working men's clubs, the social clubs, the little church things, the functions, the village green fairs and all this kind of stuff, people putting on less. It seems because of Netflix and all the TV that's at people's disposal these days, that the young who love entertainment, who love being entertained, the committee men and the workmen's clubs and social clubs, the people with a passion for entertainment, once they pop their clogs and they go, the next people taking over just want to have disco, or they want to have fun nights, or sing along a movie, or something completely different, or drag nights, or whatever. That they're having different forms of entertainment coming, or they're not getting people in the clubs and the pubs, because the pubs as well, let's include them, because the pubs feed the other venues. So if people aren't coming out because there's amazing things on Netflix, amazing documentaries and things you can watch on television, then why go to the pub? Why go to the social club, the workmen's club? Why go to the holiday parks? If you've got all your entertainment on your phone and your iPad and your Kindles and whatever, wherever you get your entertainment from, your laptops, then why do you want to go out? Because when you do go out and you sat there in front of a comedian or a ventriloquist or a juggler or a magician, and you see someone go, whoa, that's great, oh my God, and you're blown away by it. You're blown away by it because you're sat in the presence of someone giving off really good energy, giving off, a stand-up comedy, a comedian who's really in the flow and he's banging off those gags. Wow, this is hilarious. Why is it not as funny as this on Netflix? Or because you're sat in the room with the person giving off the vibes, giving off that energy, giving off that positive frequency and they're in the flow, they're in the mood, they've got the gags, the one-liners, and it's all there, you know. But what happens when those clubs and things dwindle away? And they are. You know, when I'm thinking of the up-and-coming ventriloquists, we'll get into them shortly. Max Fulham and Celia Munez and the people from Britain's Got Talent, the young guy with
Jamie Leahy, yeah,
Jamie, yeah, them kind of people. These are the ones coming through now. Seem to be singing a lot, apart from Max. You know, Max is into his comedy, but some of them maybe that's the way the ventriloquism's going to go in a different direction in future. You might get the Joe Longthorne, a British Terry Fator might come over and do what Joe Longthorne did, which is what Terry Fator's doing. He's doing great vocal impressions through the dummies. I hope it will adapt. I hope there'll be someone on Drag Race and they'll come up and there'll be a drag queen or someone maybe from Drag Race who can do a fabulous outfit and a fabulous dummy outfit to go with it. And two of them could, you know, get through the, I don't know, or it may be with the DJ. DJs are entertainment these. I guess variety's got to adapt. You know, people want to come out and be entertained. Entertainment's got to be adaptable. When I watched BGT the other night, this is 2023 now. This is June 2023, and the other night we had the final in the UK of the BGT, and it was Vigo
Venn.
Right. Now, doesn't strike me as a stand-up comedian, doesn't strike me as a Steve Martin or a Howie Mandel, you know, loud, maybe with lots of props. He got the balloon thing. I didn't see, he seems to dance a lot. He seemed to just raise people's spirits. He made you smile. He was like a blue coat, red coat, a nutty blue coat.
A high vis green coat.
That kind of thing. He's just, with the dance and his silliness, he lifted the room's energy up.
He captured their imaginations. Yeah.
You know, whether he can sustain that for an hour on stage, I don't know. There'd be a lot of dancing involved and a lot of, you know, I can imagine him being more of a coach.
Yeah. Well, somebody sent me a link to his website. I looked at his website. He's a stand-up comedian from Norway, and he's sold out a gig last night in London. He's got another gig on this Friday in London. He already had these booked in the diary. He's over in London, and he's doing BGT. He's won BGT, and now they're selling out these. So what he's done, it has worked. But he's a clown. I didn't know he was a clown. Did you?
No, I didn't. He's going to make a lot of merchandise.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those yellow fighters.
Yeah, and he will. He'll sell loads on the door. But he's literally a Covent Garden, a very good Covent Garden act, and because he was entertaining the people out on the streets to get into the TV studio, into the Apollo, he was outside entertaining them in the line. Amanda said that on the show the other night. So it was a great way of getting the whole audience on your side as well.
Yeah.
So he's a people person. He's like Andrew Robley on a cruise. You know, you talk to your audiences before you go out and do that. And if you're like that, you don't mind going out there and meeting your audiences. I love speaking to people and then come and see the show, you know. I should do that when I get to my theatre tours, you know. I could spend the whole day in town with a puppet.
It was a breath of air.
I mean, he was.
Okay, if you've got a clown background, that kind of falls into place, because sometimes when you watch a comedian, when I used to watch Freddie Starr, and I watched him in 1977 in Margate, Winter Gardens. That's the first time I saw Freddie, and I saw Freddie at the Blazers and Lakeside, and I used to go bowling with him in the end when we worked in Bournemouth together on different shows. With cast members of all the shows. We just meet up in the bowling alleys. He's always next to my show because he loved me and Jimmy Jones. He loved my boxer, Lightning Lays. He gave me gags for him. But when I first saw, where does he come from? He's not a stand-up comedian. He's funny. He's silly. He's anarchic. He's crazy. I don't know where he comes from. And then you read his book and you realise he was in Hamburg with the Beatles. He's playing in a band. He's singing. He's got a good voice. You can't dispute that. But then he starts larking around in between songs. There's a musicality to his silliness. Always there's a musicality to it, you know.
Yeah.
So once you connect the dots and you can see where Freddie Starr is coming from, now you can see where Veggio, Vagawoogio, Viagra.
Viagra Venn. Yeah. Well, it's like Johnny Casson. Johnny Casson was in a band as a drummer, and in his 50s, he started to do some stand-up. Des O'Connor made Johnny Casson popular, you know, and so yeah, they started off in bands, and musicians. I don't know if you know the comedian, the puppeteer guy. His name is Trevor James, and the Venezuelan flocking parrot, you know, who done the Royal Variety Show.
Oh, he's been on YouTube.
I've been asked to come here to give a short talk on the subject of a very rare species, the Venezuelan jungle parrot. The Venezuelan jungle parrot is a most unusual bird. First of all, because it has absolutely no fear whatsoever of heights. This enables the bird to build its nest at the top of the loftiest tree in the jungle, from whence its beautiful and plaintive cry rings out across the jungle treetops. Hello! Right, Sid, go to it. There's an old mill by the stream. Melody! Where we used to sit and dream. By the stream. Where we used to sit and dream. Enjoy your evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Genius. And when I do talks on ventriloquism, although he does a cod ventriloquist act, the puppet thing, I show that at the end of all of my talks, because it is such a great ending to the talk, because he makes fun of the ventriloquist, but it's just such a funny routine. And he started off in a band as well. He was in a band, he was singing, he come up front, he started to do the parrot, and then they started to book, not the band, they said, can we book the parrot? And so he started to do the parrot as his act, and it was literally 10, 12 minutes long. That's all he had with the parrot, because he was anarchic. And the band members, Bob Scupham, who I met a couple of months ago in up north in Glossop, that's where Trevor James is from, and they were saying how crazy this. He would come out and do a new prop every night, and he'd just do things that weren't in the act, but he would make them laugh. They loved him, you know. And there's so many stories, and he's in the book. Trevor James is in the book. I interviewed him because of that reason, that it was just a wonderful story, you know. It's amazing to see where they started and where they come from, and when they come out of nowhere like Vigo Ven did, it blows you away, you know. Maybe ventriloquism will find its Vigo. Maybe it'll find somebody who's got a different take on it. Like I was blown away with Terry Fator, because I'd done hundreds of shows with Joe Longthorne, and who was you know, anybody listening to this in years to come will know Joe Longthorne was like a human jukebox. You could see him do David Bowie, and then his voice sounded like David Bowie, and then he'd do Frank Sinatra, then he'd do Tom Jones in duet with Shirley Bassey, then he'd do a Bing Crosby, then he'd be doing Ray Charles, and any singer, anybody, he could do it, and John Lennon, he could do anybody. Joe Longthorne had this gift. Terry Fator's got the same gift, and he does that with ventriloquism as his kind of tool to hang his talent onto. And I think maybe there's something else will come, someone will come along who's a non-musical act, or with a different slant, as I say, like drag racing, or with something else. Yeah. I hope ventriloquism can adapt over the years to
keep itself modern. It usually does. When you think about the masks, when you think of what Nina does, Nina Conti, a whole show, and we saw her West End show, a different nights. I didn't see it with you, like Spitting Image. I didn't see it with you because we live 7 hours apart and we're not down the road from each other anymore. But Nina Conti, how do you sustain that? But she does. She sustains it by ad-libbing and working off an improvisational kind of comedy that keeps the audience entertained with all these people on stage, and she works them all. Very clever. But yeah, that's bringing that mask routine and just putting a spotlight just on the masks only. Whereas Jeff Dunham is stand-up comedy, and is like watching the way Walter works now and Peanut is completely different to Walter and Peanut 15 to 20 years ago, because he's changed to more an observational style of comedy. He's still gags, but he's very much observational nowadays with what he's doing. And the ventriloquists that are clever can adapt. And you hope the ventriloquists and the community with these new people coming through, what we need more, will adapt to the modern environment.
Eyes and Teeth. Thanks to Jimmy for joining me this week for a brilliant insight to the world of comedy and ventriloquism. You can connect with Jim on Facebook and check out his website at www.jimmytamley.com. Today's quote comes from Steve Martin. I believe that sex is one of the most beautiful, natural, wholesome things that money can buy. Eyes and Teeth is written, produced and hosted by Steve Hewlett, vocals by Lola, Larissa and Nina Hewlett, additional vocals by Rich T. The Eyes and Teeth music and jingles are produced and performed by Kevin Dean. Join me on the next edition of Eyes and Teeth when Jimmy and I finish off our conversation in part 2. See you soon.